The Kremlin leader is afraid to state to President Trump outright that he wants to continue this war. Instead, he is setting unrealistic preconditions to prolong the hostilities. This was stated by President Zelenskyy in his evening address. Commenting on statements from Moscow, Zelenskyy stressed that Vladimir Putin is using manipulative rhetoric to avoid directly rejecting the proposed ceasefire, suggesting that Russia is deliberately stalling peace efforts.
Putin does this often. He doesn't say no outright, but he drags things out and makes reasonable solutions impossible. We see this as yet another round of Russian manipulation. We are not setting conditions that complicate the process. Russia is. As we have always said, the only one stalling, the only one being unconstructive is Russia. They need this war. Putin has stolen years of peace and continues this war day after day. Now is the time to increase pressure on him. Sanctions must be applied.
On Thursday, while speaking alongside the Belarusian self-proclaimed president, Putin stated that Moscow would agree to a 30-day ceasefire in Ukraine only if Kyiv guarantees it will not mobilize, train, or receive weapons during this period. Also, according to the Kremlin leader, there are a number of questions as to how compliance would be monitored along the 2,000-kilometer-long front. Almost a whole day spent under the rubble in Kostiatynivka in the Donetsk region. Rescuers saved a woman who was trapped under debris following a Russian airstrike. According to the State Emergency Service, they worked continuously to dismantle the rubble and find survivors. With help from local police, they managed to pull the woman out alive after being trapped for 20 hours. She was immediately handed over to paramedics and transported to the hospital. Sweden will deliver a new military aid package worth approximately $300 million to Ukraine. This was announced by Swedish Defense Minister Paul Jonsson on his X page, making it Sweden's 18th defense support package. The country will procure and deliver 18 Archer self-propelled artillery systems and 5 Arthur counter-battery radar systems to strengthen Ukraine's defense. The package also aims to coordinate training, artillery support, and supplies for Ukraine's armed forces as part of an international coalition. According to Jonsson, the long-term goal is to strengthen Ukraine's artillery capability and increase interoperability with NATO. Negotiations between the United States and Russia over a potential 30-day ceasefire in Ukraine have included discussions on territorial issues and a major power facility, likely the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. This was stated by President Trump. During an Oval Office meeting with NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte, Trump stated that he hopes Russia will do the right thing in terms of a proposed ceasefire.
Well, we'd like to see a ceasefire from Russia. And we have, not been working in the dark. We've been discussing with Ukraine land and pieces of land that would be kept and lost and all of the other elements of a final agreement. There's a power plant involved, a very big power plant involved. Who's going to get the power plant and who's going to get this and that? And so, it's not an easy process.
Trump also commented on Putin's statements about the ceasefire made in Moscow, adding that he'd like to meet the Kremlin leader.
He put out a very promising statement, but it wasn't complete. And yeah, I'd love to meet with him or talk to him. But we have to get it over with fast. Every day people are being killed.
Vladimir Putin met with the U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff late in the evening on March 13th, reported the Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov. According to him, Putin relayed information and additional signals for Trump through the American representative. Peskov added that both Russia and the U.S. understand the necessity of a conversation between the two leaders. However, the time has not been agreed yet. Following his visit, Steve Witkoff returned to the U.S. to discuss the outcome with Trump, reported National Security Advisor Mike Waltz on air at Fox News on Thursday.
But we do have some cautious optimism. Of course, both sides are going to have their demands, and of course, both sides are going to have to make some compromises. And the shuttle diplomacy of going back and forth is happening. I've spoken to my counterpart, Special Envoy Witkoff is out there and bringing things back for us to evaluate and for the President Trump to make decisions on next steps.
Russian forces carried out a double strike on a hospital in Zelenskyy, Kharkiv region, on March 14th. According to the State Emergency Service, a 33-year-old suffered an acute stress reaction. The explosion set the roof on fire, with the flames engulfing 1,500 square meters of the building. While firefighters were working to extinguish the blaze, Russian troops attacked again, causing them to pause their rescue efforts and take shelter. Earlier on Thursday evening, Moscow troops attacked the city of Kharkiv. 7 people suffered acute stress reactions, 4 of them children. Drones struck a Russian oil refinery in Tuapse on March 14th, setting the facility ablaze, reported the regional governor. According to him, there were no casualties, though a fuel tank caught fire, with flames engulfing 1,000 square meters of the refinery. Head of the Ukrainian Center for Countering Disinformation, Andriy Kovalenko, stated that the Tuapse refinery is one of the biggest in the country, with an annual output of 12 million tons, and plays a key role in Russia's military supply chain. Ukraine can count on Spain, stated the country's defense minister, Maria Robles. While meeting her Ukrainian counterpart, Rustem Umerov, in Madrid, Robles stated that Spain has supported Ukraine since the beginning of Russia's full-scale invasion and will continue to do so.
We believe firmly in the peace, and we have to work all together in order to reach the peace. A peace lasting and a peace fair. That's the most important. Ukraine deserves the peace, and I'm sure you will reach the peace. And you can count on Spain in this process.
Ukraine is already forming a team which will develop ways to monitor any possible ceasefire. This was reported by the Ukrainian Foreign Minister Andriy Sybiha during a joint press conference with his Austrian counterpart, Beata Meino-Reisinger.
We have already begun to form a national team that will develop appropriate algorithms for proper control of a possible truce.
The biggest Chinese state company has curbed Russian oil imports on sanctions risks, reported Reuters in an article published on Friday. Multiple trade sources told journalists that at least 2 importers halted all purchases, including the biggest state-run Sinopec, while another 2 reduced their volumes while they assessed recent U.S. sanctions on Moscow. Reuters posted that this scaling back by Chinese state players has weighed on Russia's oil prices, eating into Moscow's revenues and putting additional pressure on Russia ahead of a possible ceasefire deal with Ukraine. Meanwhile, Russia is using cryptocurrency to facilitate oil trade with China and India, bypassing Western sanctions. Citing sources, Reuters reports that Russian oil companies are using digital assets such as Bitcoin, Ethereum, and stablecoins like Tether to convert Chinese yuan and Indian rupees into Russian rubles. The scheme involves an intermediary receiving payments into an offshore account, converting them into cryptocurrency, and transferring the funds to Russia, where they are exchanged for rubles. NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte reported that relations with Russia should be normalized following an end to the war in Ukraine, adding, however, that we are absolutely not there yet.
You have to maintain the pressure on the Russians to make sure that they do whatever is necessary. That's why we have the sanctions, and let's not be naive about the Russians. We have to maintain the pressure on them to make sure that they are willing to engage seriously in talks with the American administration and, of course, also with the Ukrainians.
During an interview on Bloomberg TV, a day after meeting the U.S. president in the Oval Office, the anchor asked Rutte if the issue of Ukraine's membership was taken off the table.
The U.S. is saying this. First, we need a peace deal / a ceasefire. And the president is very clear on this, that obviously there will be many issues to be discussed and debated when a ceasefire / a peace deal is there.
He's already taken off Ukraine joining NATO off the table.
Mm-hmm.
Germany may allocate 3 billion euros more in military aid to Ukraine, stated German Chancellor candidate Friedrich Merz on Friday at a press conference in Berlin. According to Tagesschau News, Merz believes that there are no more obstacles for the planned aid to Ukraine, and the decision may be approved next week, after the upper house passes a plan to allow drastically higher public spending.
We have been informed that the Chancellor has told us himself and also told me that he's prepared to release these 3 billion as soon as the special fund and this decision on defense spending have been taken. So I'm assuming that with next week's decision at the latest, these 3 billion can also be released as scheduled expenditure.